Maybe we can start by talking a little bit about transdisciplinary learning, and then people will have some questions on the topic.
You usually give me the Zoom, so we do the following because the session is different than we thought in the first place, and we want to make sure that we have at least some sort of. Is Luci there? Luci is there. Wonderful. Luci, can you do me a favor? Can you shortly give me at the most 2 to 3 minutes your argument on transdisciplinary learning? Just 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, that's possible. Part of my job is to think about transdisciplinary research and education. And in short, in brief, transdisciplinary is an approach that respects values and differences in such a way that it tries to unite those differences. It demands a process of avoiding reduction, thinking together, and sometimes approaching problems together, particularly in terms of education. So you can think in a general sense, if there was a transdisciplinary course, it would be one in which the students were asked to solve a problem, maybe having had lectures from a series of different experts in the field, and using the information that those different experts had provided the students, those students would work together to be able to create what they thought might be a solution. So the skills that you get with a course like this are about group work, about thinking together, about thinking about problems in a new way by drawing in knowledge from different disciplines. The trouble with this way is that most universities aren't set up for this to be a possibility. And most students don't think in terms of getting a degree in solving problems. They get a degree in a particular subject. So there are some very obvious issues there to think about. And the education system, which, as we all know, is very young, the sort of Euro-American education system that now dominates the planet, which is very young, is set up in terms of helping people become skilled in one or maybe two things. And this was set up during the Industrial Revolution so that the people being educated in schools would come out able to either do the accounting or to write the ledgers of the factories that were coming up all across Europe. Education hasn't been designed for people really to test the system, but rather, or to come up with solutions, but rather to be quite obedient workers within a particular field. And that's what the majority of the population who come out of higher education do, is they join the workforce. So that's the overarching point of education in most people's minds. But of course, oh, you want me to stop?
Go ahead.
Okay, so what transdisciplinarity does is it challenges some of those assumptions quite deeply, which means that most people kind of struggle because they think in terms of subjects, and if there aren't subjects, you know, how do we continue to educate people to be able to respond to the world? I'll stop there. Thank you.
Just give us a short, let's say, 2 to 3 minutes. What is your argument? You're introduced already as a professor with all your background. You're just interested in your basic argument on transdisciplinary learning.
Okay. I am a professor, as you see, at the University of Brasilia, and the transdisciplinary is my workday word because I am, as economist, I teach for non-economists at management school. So it's quite challenging to convince non-economists about economic theory. So I see that I develop a way of study and teaching, and to handle with different kind of students, mostly non-economists that don't like economics. So I believe that they like the classes because I believe that the way to how can I say, to make them to like or to make something interest about this hard economic theory is to spread and to take some simple examples of life and to make how can I say, not an academic way of being the students, but academic, but the way of studying and teaching together. So I believe that I believe that this way of living with the students, we that doesn't study economics, since I teach economics at management school at University of Brasilia, helps me to develop a different way of thinking, and I have even a thesis called Power Stimulates that links social power forces, including business and economic cycles and the governance structures. I believe that this transdisciplinarity and the holistic view can be brought to classrooms. That's my point. Sorry for my theoretical connections, but I'm trying to show a way to connect praxis and theory and in a classroom, not just to discuss, but to join to the classrooms and to the lifetime. And I believe that the professor's Luci told is in this connection. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Now we have Elena, it's your turn for a final statement, and then we hope that we can at least discuss a little bit because.
As you can tell, the concept of transdisciplinary learning for now is a vision of a future, something that we're trying to think about, that we're trying to implement, and that we're not so great at even talking about yet because it's emergent, okay? So for me, when I think of transdisciplinarity, and I really appreciate how Dr. ATTALA mentioned that it is a transdisciplinary approach centers around solving problems and then looking at how each discipline may inform that problem from a different angle, a different methodological analysis, and then entering into a constructive conversation about what we're learning, what is the convergence across the disciplines. And so in my field, which is in the social sciences, I'm a psychologist and an educator in the social sciences. When I think about transdisciplinarity, I think about how all issues that I deal with in the social sciences are at the intersection of a range of different fields, from individual health, psychological, emotional, but also physical and spiritual health. So that's already a bunch of disciplines right there. And that intersects with culture. Culture has a lot to do with human well-being, the history of culture, traumatization in culture. Now we're really broadening the conversation. Then we have to look at understanding moral development and values, which always bears upon social issues and issues of health and well-being. And the dimension that's often ignored is the dimension of language. Language itself is a powerful way to bridge the gap across disciplines, because language, what we emphasize and what we de-emphasize, or what we don't mention at all, in fact shapes us. And even though linguistic disciplines are in academia separate disciplines, applied linguistics And the language, the connection between language and culture has a lot to do with health. In my work, in my research, in my clinical studies that are described in my books, most recent one, Global Unitive Healing, I'm looking at healing as a problem, a transdisciplinary problem that needs to be addressed and solved through a range of disciplines, and not only the ones that I bring to bear, but probably many more. And then there is the issue of social capital. Do you know what social capital is? Does anybody know what social capital is? Social capital is the level of trust in a society, the level of trust in institutions, and also the level of trust in each other in society. So social capital, obviously, the higher the level of trust, the more people are able to cooperate, the higher the level generally of health. And so we now are living at a time in the world where trust is at an all-time low across societies. We don't trust our institutions. National, global institutions are compromised. Economic systems are compromised. And so social capital, or the lack thereof in many ways, or the way people redefine social capital also bears upon health. So you can see this, when I'm thinking about health, that is an example for me of a completely transdisciplinary approach. It also involves geopolitical forces and processes, and it involves global governance. Because, and I'll give you examples, the presence or absence of a world corruption board, something that has been proposed by world civil society, has the likelihood to increase social capital, to increase people's level of sense of well-being, their sense of empowerment, their sense of I can bring about greater justice, or I can feel better, I can engage in ways that are meaningful for me, or I cannot. So there we see global governance is another category that seems to be far away from the concept of human health and well-being, but it's obviously directly connected. So most, and I'll just say that in closing, most of the problems that we're now facing, whether they're pollution or poverty, or corruption, or geopolitical conflicts and wars, are essentially transdisciplinary by their very nature. So no one discipline can address them, and that is the reality of the 21st century. You are still getting your degrees, as Dr. ATTALA was saying, in one discipline, but in fact, the problems that you'll be facing, no matter what your degree, no matter what your specialty, are transdisciplinary problems. And so the more we're realizing that, the more there's this search for transdisciplinary methods to complement the methods of particular disciplines. And that's the conversation that you're hearing here. I think I'll stop.
Maybe you ask him, what are you studying and how do you see transdisciplinarity in your own discipline? So what are you studying? You're studying medicine?
I think that these days we can't do anything without group collaboration, because everything is about like everything, and every problem needs at least like 2 to 3 disciplines to work together to solve it. So we as future doctors like need to be aware of the other disciplines and have to work with them too.
Great, that's a great start.
Maybe you can give it another answer, yeah? Yeah.
Or add to this. I agree with my plan. We have to be in a at some point in other disciplines, and it's not just in medicine. It's all other disciplines. We need to be together to work with people and to think to solve any other problem. We have to think together, do together. That's just we have to do.
From what you've heard from the speakers, is there a question that comes up for you at this time, given your experience with multidisciplinary collaboration or team collaboration, and also what you've heard, does that leave you with some kind of a question or observation that you can share?
Yes. Go ahead first, yeah.
I'm studying medicine too, and as they say, we need to work together with groups from different disciplines. How can raise myself, or how can we raise students? They also have knowledge about different. So I take just lessons for my teachers, but I don't learn anything about, for example, biochemistry or engineering. How can I raise myself transdisciplinary, or we can raise people and students transdisciplinary?
Maybe the other question too?
It's actually similar. I mean, it's manifest the issue that we have, for example, as a doctor. When I go and talk to an engineer, they have a different perspective, and we also have a terminology issue. So when I mention something medical, they won't really get it, and also when they mention.
Can you make an example?
For example, I would say, let's say I'm talking about a device that's manifest or try to organize the heartbeat. When I say the heart pulse, or let's say tachycardia, or say tachycardia, and we say what's tachycardia?
Yeah.
Or what's hypertension? It's something more. I'm trying to be general, so everyone understands. So this is kind of an ununderstandable thing for other people, and we face this issue because we need to work with, let's say, medical engineers in order to make more sophisticated technology to serve patients. So this is, I think it's a big issue, and how we can solve this issue from your point of perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great questions. I'd like to give it to Stefan and then see if any of the other speakers. Oh, yes, we have Dr. ATTALA. Why don't you go ahead first, please?
Hi, thank you. In medical teaching in the last maybe 20 years, they've moved away from a model of thinking that the body is mechanical and needs fixing rather like a car might, and to something that's a more holistic model of health. So instead of taking parts of the body apart and fixing them, like, for example, the heart, a medical practitioner now thinks in terms of the social context, the economic contexts, the genetic context, and so on, to diagnose a problem. And that's what transdisciplinarity is at root, that it thinks holistically about problems for the totality of the planet, not just for an individual. So I think that's a very easy way to understand the difference in how transdisciplinary thinking, or what transdisciplinary thinking is trying to do. So, for example, the electric car is a solution for the car industry, not the planet, right? That's the kind of thinking that we have at the moment in terms of solutions. Oh, cars use oil, so therefore let's find another way. It doesn't think about the problem that the car brings to the entirety of the planet. All of the problems with minerals and with travel and with how a town is designed, and ill health for fumes, and traffic congestion, traffic accidents, drunken driving, all of those problems that come with the fact that a car exists at all. So this is asking for a way of thinking holistically about problems that draws in as many perspectives as possible, so that the solution is not only a solution in that it fixes something, but it's sustainable and it's holistic. And by sustainable, I don't just mean that it'll perpetuate things, but rather that it'll help us live well as people. We don't actually need cars necessarily, but everybody thinks the solution to cars is a different kind of car. So it's about creativity, it's about innovative thinking, not just innovation. It's about changing your mind. It's about seeing the world differently. Thank you.
Thank you. And this was a very nice way to reframe what has been discussed here, that it's not just about the challenge across terminology from different fields, which is what you were bringing up, and maybe we can come back to that, but it's about broadening the issue, putting it in the context of what are we trying to serve, what are we trying to address here. And so maybe that's also this kind of holistic perspective is also a way for you to think about talking across jargons. You know, every field has its own jargon, but at the end of the day, the jargon of medicine and the jargon of an electrical engineer may be different. But if you're asking the question, what is the problem we're trying to solve? How does this gadget work or this system work, and how does it address the problem? Then now you are talking more holistically across the jargons. And so that's just an extension to address the second part of your question. And I see we have Professor Eduard ALARCON there with his hand up, and then Danielle, Sandi as well.
So thanks a lot. I want to start with a position statement now. I think it's too late and the discussion is already alive, but I would like to chime in and reinforce some of the things that were said. So Dr. Luci ATTALA, you were talking about a variety of skills that students should learn to be more multidisciplinary. I think that even if the methods in science and humanities, they are different, the very human creative act that sometimes is like a rapture, the process of ideation is very similar in both science and humanities. And that's what I humbly think that we need to reivindicate across disciplines, what we share as a method of being multidisciplinary in the way that we provide solutions. Now, in the way we articulate the curriculum, or even in the way we articulate the teamwork in a class, so that type of creative thinking, complex systems thinking, the use of analogies to be more creative, these are things that they are not a mystery. We need to debunk the myth that this is a mystery. This is something that can be learned if students are exposed to experiences. So I represent just a boring field of electrical engineering, but I've been trying to flip a curriculum in the past 20 years for it to become more interdisciplinary. And to my humble experience, if the students are exposed not just to scientific knowledge, which is already very aseptic and distilled, but if they are exposed to the way the mind of a scientist works. So if the students are not just exposed to analyzing an already existing engineering device, but they are exposed to the way the human mind designs. So we share the process across disciplines. I think that the students should be exposed to that process, which is very human. So that's one position to continue the conversation.
Okay, so do we have...
I would like to ask you a question. What do you think? You're studying medicine, right? What do you think, which disciplines will become the most relevant within the next 5 years for you in order to better understand diseases, disorders, and ailments? What do you think? Which disciplines?
Other than medicine,
outside of medicine.
I do think about engineering, medical engineering to be serving us in the future, because they are really working in the term of AI, generally engineering. They're working to make a more sophisticated type of AI. And I think this will make, some people say that will delete some type of medical discipline like radiology, etc. But I don't believe this. I think it will help us to serve high amounts of people because the population are growing right now, and human beings are not able to serve human beings because we have a lot of patient points. So, for example, let's say AI will help us to define which cases more emergent, which cases more need to be intervened earlier, and which case can wait in order to take its own treatment later on. Because this is, we are human beings and we get tired sometime after, let's say, 48 hours working some doctors work as long as this, and they make mistakes. But computers, AI are making less mistakes. So I think medical engineering will do a big job.
Which one would you recommend? What do you think is another important discipline?
I think the psychology is really important.
Psychology,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, because even if we like go to AI and start developing and it's like really a big influence in our lives, but we are humans and we need to understand ourselves before the computers and other things. So I think it's really important the psychology to I couldn't find
Yeah,
the word.
okay, so we have AI, technology, psychology. What is your take on that question? Yes, just try it. Yeah, say it.
Ben de sosyolojide istedim çünkü şöyle gelecek zamanda robotlar ve yapay zeka eğitimde gelişecek ama insana olan ihtiyacımız nasıl yok eksikliği ama insanın olan ihtiyacı devam edecek ve sosyolojide bunu karşılanması.
He says he believes that sociology is going to be
Which one?
sociology.
Sociology, okay. And the other two?
I would like to add, he said also AI will be effective for our discipline, but also he says robots couldn't have emotions, so we need to understand our patient's emotions. And he says exposure will be important and that's important. And I would say we have engineering, sociology, but also pharmacy will be continued. We have new disease and also new solutions.
Yeah, okay.
All things are already said. I don't have any other topics to say in. Yeah, kind of.
I have a question for you. Do you think global governance has anything to do with medicine?
Can you say that again?
Do you think global governance has anything to do with medicine?
So, üretim alakası bir şeydi. O nasıl doktorlar eğitimi ya da sağlık şeyleri eğitimi.
Doesn't seem like an obvious connection, right?
It's actually, when we talk about global government, it's from political points, and now, for example, we see a lot of wars and the lack of medical support to this tension part of the world. So I think if with global government would come to a point and gather and agree that there should be no obstruction of any kind of medical support for people in need, no matter where there's any kind of pressure, no matter where what's their send that they live, we should take politics away, and medical support, logistic support should not be cut off from any kind of human being, no matter where, what's the reason of the war. We as a medical people don't involve in politics. This thing should not, people's life should not be related to politics. So that's what we wish from global government, to preserve people's medical, food rights, social support, psychological support, these things are essential and should not be cut off from any kind of area of the work. That's what I would say.
That's a great example of the role of global governance. Thank you. That's what I was hoping we can also recognize, that sometimes very vast, different areas of human endeavor really bear upon it. And another example in global governance very quickly is the fact that medicine in many of the Western countries has become such corporate industry that its prices are forbidding for a lot of people. That is also a matter of global regulations. So that people being able to practice medicine meaningfully, giving everybody access to health and the same quality of healthcare has a lot to do with global regulations. So in a way, as doctors, once you hit the ground and begin to practice, these are the kind of things you come upon, and then you end up having to read and inform yourself of areas that you never took courses in, but that really directly bear upon what you're trying to do. So that's another example. So this was a good conversation. Does anybody want to add anything to it as we're wrapping it up? We see
Time is out.
our time is out. Professor ALARCON, you have a closing thought you'd like to share?
I just wanted to elaborate on the question that Stefan was posing, and that you continued with the conversation. You were asking a legitimate question, which is the most important discipline if we look ahead. That's a legitimate one, but I start to identify that there is consensus in this conversation that we all need to foster interdisciplinary learning so as to articulate very complex multidisciplinary teams or task forces that aim or pursue the grand challenges of humanity. So I don't think that we need to bet on one discipline, but the question is, if the students would be allowed to pick up 2 disciplines, which do we think are pairs or combinations of disciplines that would better align to the grand challenges that the humanity is facing? Is it, I'm guessing, but I would like to be a bit controversial and foster a conversation. Is it politics and literature?
Yeah.
Is it engineering and medicine? That, of course. Is it, so which are combinations to which a single student is exposed, perhaps if they are very bold with a double degree in parallel?
Take your questions for the coffee break. Thank
Understood.
you for your contributions.